Welcome to another episode of the Atelier Live. We are coming to you from our office in Shoreditch, a couple of minutes late, sorry for that. We've cranked up the heating again. It is actually always boiling in this room. We should probably ask them to do the air conditioning. It's ready for our next fireside chat. If you don't know who we are, and you just landed into this LinkedIn, then hello. We are a London-based headhunting business working to place marketing, creative and leadership talent into the fashion, beauty and hospitality industries.
Some of the most exciting things we've done recently include placing the new CMO for Reavley perfumes, as well as the creative director for Beauty Pie and the head of marketing for Uniqlo. You're so welcome to participate in this conversation by adding questions into the comments section here, and one of our glamorous team will shout them out to us. Hi Imogen, hi Tina, hi Busy the dog.
Hi.
Rachel, should we introduce ourselves and say some cringe things?
Yeah, why not? I'm Rachel. I'm one half of the duo fronting Atelier, and I head up all of our creative searches. I come up with these fun facts because I think it's a nice way to break the ice for everyone, but it's also mortifying because every time I start thinking of things I'm like, oh my god. But so I think maybe I should say about my first job, which I did lots of interviews for like civil service and I didn't get any of them, but I did manage to get a job at River Island in Hempstead, and I literally thought I was the coolest person in the world. And by the time I was doing it when I was 16, but when I was 17 I got the keys to the till, which meant I could do refunds. So I
Finding lots of refunds.
really felt so. I remember thinking to myself like, I've made it. Like I don't know where I'm going to go from here. And I could do refunds, and everything was amazing, and I really enjoyed it. But I also really upset quite a lot of people that used to come in who bought stuff for parties. And I'd be like, you've worn this for a party, and now you're trying to bring it back.
It's
no way. Yeah. So anyway, sorry if you ever experienced me in Hempstead, River Island.
I'm Jo, I head up all of our marketing searches here. I once had a freelance job when I was about 20 when I first moved to London. It was the credit crunch at the time, and I was on a day rate to sit outside the post offices and tell all the old women that the post office was closed down.
Post office is closed.
The post office closed. Sat there at a desk on my own.
Just saying the post office is
in the suburbs of London.
I love that. Gorgeous.
It's a good one, isn't it?
It's a very good one. So being headhunters within marketing and creative gives us access to some of the most interesting people out there. Today is obviously no exception.
Thank you. Rachel, hi.
Hello.
You've held executive leadership and commercial roles at world-renowned publishers and e-commerce companies, including Condé Nast, YNAB and Thread Styling. This also means you're a badass in strategy, sales, brand and business building, and have a unicorn skill set of marrying creative and commercial.
Thank you, I'll take it.
Thank you so much for being here.
Paste and copy that and add it onto
You can have it,
yeah.
You can have it. Quotes. Yeah, thank you so much for coming over, especially when you've literally just landed from Chicago.
I have,
I know.
sorry, I sound a little bit like Marge Simpson and I'm not quite sure what time of day it is, but
I always sound like Marge Simpson now, so that's fine. And we also, I just keep hearing lovely things about you all the time. And then we also had Becky Stallion saying about how you're her mentor and how important you are to her. And then we were like, she's coming on the next podcast.
I know, I thought that was incredibly generous of her, so thanks Becky if you're watching.
Oh, but I think, but she's the type of person that gives kudos to lots of people.
Yeah, she does, she's great like that.
And it's amazing. So I think it would be really helpful for our audience to understand a little bit more about you, because you're quite a polymath, you have so many different skills and you've done so much evolution in your career. So I would love to understand just a very whistle-stop tour, because we're going to deep dive in our questions, but maybe a whistle-stop tour as to where you are right now.
Okay. It's always quite hard to condense sort of 25 years, without sending everyone to sleep. Well, I guess I knew I wanted to work in fashion, and I was always very drawn to creative people, and my social life very much kind of like dictated that. So I was lucky that when I finished university that I immediately started working with friends, and that was at the very beginning of working with a company that still exists called Guinea 5. We were sort of a two-part company. We were Guinea 5 and we were also Stussy, because we were very fortunate that Sean Stussy allowed us to import his fantastic kind of streetwear into the UK.
Oh my god, do you still have any of that stuff? It must be worth
I do not have as much as my children would like.
Yes.
Actually, because at the time we also worked with a lot of Japanese labels, and if I'm honest, I was probably a bit more of a hysteric glamour girl.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of really kind of amazing kind of kind of pieces that were from the samples. But it was it was a fantastic time. I really loved it, and it's still actually I draw a lot of value from that even now throughout my career, because I think the people I worked with then are still incredibly talented and have gone on to have very sort of enduring careers, because they were very true and authentic words that get a bit overused these days, but to kind of what they did, and they had deep knowledge and passion. And we were lucky enough to be working with people like Hiroshi Fujiwara and Inigo, Hayes, Hang Ten, all these kind of incredible brands, but also that very much related back into music, because a lot of the people we were working with were also hip hop DJs. So we had fantastic, Primal Screen would be hanging out in the office, or Nana Cherry would pop in, or Goldie would be there.
Yeah.
So, but it was great fun. Like people worked hard and they were super creative, and we looked after people like Judy Blame. So I felt incredibly privileged even then. I kind of knew it was special.
Yeah.
But I guess there came a point. I was there for about maybe 2.5, 3 years, where I kind of wanted to go and work somewhere a bit bigger. And I just wanted to go and work in something that, hilariously and embarrassingly, I think it's because I wanted a pension. Oh my God.
A pension?
Yeah, I think that was somewhere in my dad, in the back of my head, like, let's go work somewhere.
You just sort that out now.
So I did then what I still do, and still kind of advocate for people to do, is I did what I call my 100 conversations. And I just started asking through the network that I knew that...
Do you do pensions?
Who knows? That's an amazing pension scheme. It just happens to be in fashion. And as it turned out, that was Condé Nast. But I got a tip off, and literally sort of, one of those things where it was a word of mouth moment where somebody called me and said, someone's resigned at Vogue, and I know you said this was a space that you were interested in, so I thought I'd just tell you. And so I sat there at my desk with my mates at kind of Stussy, and thought, what do I do? And I sat there for a few hours, and I just thought, nothing ventured, I'm going to call. So I called, and naivety being everything, I'd phoned the publisher's office, and I think they were so surprised that they assumed that maybe I knew him, and so I was asked to come in at 8:30 the next morning. And I had nothing to wear that was appropriate from kind of where I'd been working. So I think I borrowed a pair of trousers and went and spent the most money I'd ever spent on a jacket, which I still own.
Oh really?
Yeah. And I bought every copy of every magazine I could lay my hands on. I stayed up all night literally reading them, and just thought it was an opportunity that I had to kind of put my best foot forward in. And anyway, I was lucky. I went. I got interviewed. Consecutively 3 times, and by the end of the week, I had a job at Vogue.
Amazing.
In a department that I had no idea what they really did.
Yes.
And I have to say, I sort of, went from the outside looking in, and this was obviously slightly even pre-digital, so it was very much about print. I didn't really think about how magazines were put together and all the variants of jobs that were sort of, in those areas. So for me, I was thinking, gosh, well, maybe I'd like to be a stylist. I'm not a writer. I'm not a photographer. But I was offered a place in the commercial team, on the advertising team, and but I would spend most of my lunch breaks with the editorial team in the fashion room, and offering to be a free pair of hands to go on shoots at weekends, or because I was passionate about it, and I wasn't feeling a bit out of my depth, a bit overwhelmed on the commercial side. But actually, as time went on, I realised it was super interesting, and I loved the nuance and the variety of speaking to all these clients. And I loved being able to tell the narrative around what Vogue was and the USP of it. And because I was so deeply interested in how it was creatively put together, that became part of my, how I discussed the magazine with people. And it was beyond the metrics of just numbers. So I actually, thinking I would only stay there a short space of time, I actually ended up spending, a very happy, long kind of time working at British Vogue. I had a moment in between where I was part of the launch team on Glamour magazine, and it was interesting because at the time I had what was my peachy moment job at British Vogue. I was looking after all the fashion. I was really enjoying it, but I'm always somebody who is very curious to learn, and the opportunity to do a launch and of the backdrop of a big company like that, I thought I had to throw my hat into the ring. And actually, the businesses were very siloed in those days, so it really was like applying for a different job, and you did it slightly in secrecy until it was, a given that maybe it was going to be yours. So there was a little bit of risk element in kind of doing it, but I was fortunate enough I got the position then as the deputy on Glamour, again on the publishing team, and it was amazing because we were able to build something from the ground up, and I enjoyed the elasticity of that, and the fact that you could wear many hats, and that, to your point about Pomworth, is something that I really enjoy doing. Yeah. I like the being able to just be a little bit outside of your lane, be a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and the newness of being able to produce something and take it to market. And we were very lucky. It was at the time the fastest selling women's magazine in Europe. It was the biggest success since Cosmo in 1972.
It was huge. I remember everyone was like, finally it's something that I can read and I enjoy.
Yeah.
It's not like trashy or like so highbrow fashion. And it felt connected.
It really filled a gap. And I'm a great believer that, it's very important, whatever you're launching or what you're building, that there is definitely a core element within the group who are living that. And, at the time, other than the publisher himself, we were pretty much all under the age of 34. And it was the thing that we wanted and we understood, and we really actually advocated to have it in the small format because the powers that be weren't very convinced by that. But we were like, it was before social media. It was like, no, but we can take it out with us. I can sit in the bus, I can show it to a girlfriend, I can take it into a shop. So it was, it was very much the kind of zeitgeist of what we wanted. Then I went back to Vogue. I was asked to go back as the associate publisher then, and again, it was always such a privilege to work there because of the pool of talent that you would meet on a regular basis. You never knew when you got into the lift who was going to be in there. And it was such a door opener. I always used to say to the team that no one will ever not see you, so make sure you make the most of the opportunity when you're in front of people. But 10 years ago, I became, very curious about kind of what was happening in the landscape, particularly of media. And I always believed that magazines were about inspiration to transaction. And it seemed to me that that was what Net-a-Porter had been building. And
that's a nice phrase.
And I wanted to explore the idea of going into a totally digitally prioritised company and taking yourself again out of that comfort zone of now the deep knowledge that you knew about publishing, but actually wanted to learn about e-commerce and content in commerce. And so I was, again, lucky enough to be given the opportunity to go and work at Net-a-Porter, where our function was we were group, so we worked across Net-a-Porter, Mr. Porter and the outlet. And we were actually the only group function in the business. So that was really fantastic because we got to see all different elements of how the business was running and where they connected, and interestingly where they didn't connect. And then of course the outward facing product that we produced was Porter magazine. And it was a game changer because it was entirely digitally shoppable. Arguably not necessarily the way consumer behaviour would be now, but it was a very unique proposition to market because Net-a-Porter was able to empower it. Anything, and that was the educational process with everybody that we worked with was no dead ends. That you would be able to, whatever you saw, whether it was even a coffee table book, that the woman or whoever was reading the magazine would be able to connect with that and actually shop it. So it was a bit like peeling an onion, trying to make that work. And we launched it in 222 cities and 60 countries, and it nearly killed us, but it was kind of amazing. And then we worked across with all the buy teams, and we built content hubs, and so it was a fantastic kind of deep dive and a real sink or swim moment that you were gonna, you knew what you knew, but you needed to go in and definitely, stand back and really, learn fast what you needed to know in an e-com environment.
It must have been a real buzzy, exciting place to be, because anyone that we ever speak to that was at Net-a-Porter during those
at
that time was literally evangelic about it.
I think it really was. It was quite. I mean, it was hard work and it was fast paced. No doubt about that. Very long working weeks. but there was, Natalie Massenet was very brilliant at imbuing the concept that there was nowhere else you should be. This was very future facing, and I found that very kind of motivating. There were an incredible array of talent working there at that point, and it was a very high performance team, and I think most of us are still friends actually from that moment. So it was definitely a kind of really great experience on lots of different levels. But I guess it was at that moment that again I was kind of interested in behaviour and what was happening again in these landscapes. And I, having coming out of Vogue, Net-a-Porter, the commonality at that moment in time was it was a slightly older woman. It was definitely a 35 plus, but really it was a fantastic woman in her 40s who had spending power, nothing wrong with that. But I was interested in, not keen on labels, but I guess you would have called them then high net worth millennials.
Yeah.
And we had been talking about launching something social commerce based at Net-a-Porter. And actually we did launch something, but it didn't live for very long, that would be a whole different show. So I was then...
Is that the Netset?
Yes. Yeah. It still exists as a hashtag, but actually it was really going to be a social platform for Net-a-Porter.
Yeah, it was incredible. Because I worked for ITV at the time, and they were casting all of the talent that were...
Right. So I was part of the team that worked on the Netset, and Net-a-Porter were very good at creating sort of innovation hubs where you could go and do these kind of like next future-facing kind of projects. So I was, definitely keen to be involved in that. But, for reasons which are, now history, it didn't come to fruition. It did launch, but it didn't maintain.
Good learnings though.
But I also thought it would have worked. I really believed in it. And you could see the landscape changing fast, that, now you had Instagram and you had Snapchat, and they were still sort of buzzwords that people in the mainstream weren't really familiar with, certainly not from a commercial brand point of view. And then I was introduced to the founder of Thread Styling, and at that point it was a pretty small business. There was only about 15 people there, and but I could just see that there was a huge, unique opportunity to build something out that would be chat commerce and social commerce.
Could you maybe explain, because I think there's a few businesses with Threads in the name, could you explain maybe what Threads is for people that don't necessarily know?
Yes, so Thread Styling, it's a luxury chat commerce business, and it's really kind of housed, although now they do actually have e-com, but the beginning of this iteration of this business was that we would create actually at best kind of 100 slides a day of content, and the idea was at the beginning that you could shop real-time content, and we had to build a lot of things because Shopify didn't exist at that point. So it was like, how do you kind of keep it seamless and keep people engaged? So you'd engage them with the content, you'd swipe up, that would go into a WhatsApp group, and you were then talking to a personal shopper. So we would sort of discuss it as being the immediacy of your mobile phone, but the immersive experience of actually having customer care, so a personal shopper in your pocket. And we onboarded, actually in the first 18 months, I can remember because I like numbers, we onboarded 364 brands. And then, we raised a good raise of money, and then we really sort of, grew out the team. So actually by the time I left, we were 130 people within about a 2-year period. We've been a fast track company 2 years running. So it was really, really interesting. And it was kind of what I loved was that outward facing of being able to go and say to the brands, you really need to be on Snapchat. And they'd be like, oh my God, Rachel, why are you talking to us about that? And it's like, yeah, because, we're going to be able to bring you a customer who has, a really healthy wallet, is really engaged with you, but where you currently are is not necessarily going to speak to her. So that was kind of a really, again, a really great learn. And I'm somebody who very much believes in being inverse mentored. So I thought it was a real privilege to work with people who were a lot younger than me at that moment, because I think everything in life is a blend. So you're much more powerful if you can kind of have the blend of maybe just a bit of experience from people, but actually be able to also see that you should have flexible hierarchy in your businesses. Sometimes you're not always the best person for that job. And I really enjoy that kind of that kind of learning process. So that was really fun there. And then kind of got just out of the blue really, was called by Vogue again.
And can't stop going back.
I know. Well, I do. I know.
Revolving door of Vogue.
It was definitely. I mean, it was definitely my happy place. And Edward Enfield had come on board as the new editor, and his publisher was very newly and secretively at that point, for obvious reasons, pregnant. And it just was serendipitous that I was able to go back, and of course I knew that business inside out from a contract and brand point of view, and the brands knew me. The team was very different, which was great, because it wouldn't have been as much fun to go back to exactly what was before.
No.
And I loved what he was doing. I think he was a PR genius. I think the whole new narrative. I feel that Vogue, you're a custodian of that brand, and at any one time it should be representing what's happening culturally. And I think he was just the absolute zeitgeist for that. So it was very exciting to be able to go back into what was now more a 360 brand, and have the privilege of kind of being able to work there whilst Edward was there. I really enjoyed it. God, I keep going. I'm so sorry.
No, we're still. This is what you're here for. People are tuning in because they want to know about your background.
Right, and then
they don't want to hear about what's waffling on.
So that kind of took us right up to 10 days before lockdown. And for the first time in my life, I had decided, and I obviously didn't know about lockdown at that point.
No.
So I decided I was going to take a little mini break, swim in the Lake of Me, work out what was next, and then, hey ho, the whole world, was locked up. And so a couple of things happened. You have, I was going to say navel gazing, not if you were homeschooling and cooking. But I was, a bit later, that I was motivated at that point from the self point of view to have a little bit, to do some learning, to just do some educational. And actually, the Open University courses for 3 months were free.
Were they?
Yeah.
I missed out on that.
No, a lot of people missed out on that, but I had spotted that. So I signed up for 2 courses. One was beginning in psychology, and one was coaching and mentoring. And so I just, actually hilariously, was doing that before 8 a.m. in the morning, and then was ending up homeschooling between sort of 8 and 3:30.
Were you a good homeschooling teacher?
I used to say to my son, because my daughter was quite independent at that stage, but my son needed more support, because of his age. I used to say to him, we do not know today whether Miss Honey will be here or Godzilla might turn up. And that's what's going to make it so interesting. Definitely days of Godzilla. But I tried to hide that, and I'd go into the other room and silently shout. But most of the time, actually, it was an incredible experience in some ways, because I got to be with my son and really understand where his strengths were, what he needed support around. So you just had to kind of flip it, didn't you, to kind of whatever, to get through it. But equally, at the same time, having been in, the publishing world, done e-commerce, done s-commerce, I was now really curious about r-commerce and resale, and again, consumer behaviour, which is always at the heart of what drives me. You could just see, and even having teenage kids, my daughter was just about to be a teen at that point, and Depop was a thing in their lives. I just thought resale is super interesting, and I'd like to learn about reverse logistics. And I was really, again, lucky that I got introduced to the founders of a great business called Hardly Ever Worn It. They have an acronym known as HEWI. And I was blown away by them, because they've been an organic family business. At that point, they've been going for about 6 years. It was a very much kind of in-the-know company. They had a database that will blow your mind. It was the great and the good, of fashionistas to almost, celebrities to royalty, who had been just very discreetly detoxing their wardrobes through them.
I have done quite well from HEWI, actually. I've got some really nice sunglasses, some shoes. My big upfront learn was, wow, look at the quality of the stock. This was kind of an antiquated idea that suddenly it was a sort of a musty, thrifting experience. It's like, no, this is like, even today, 40% of their stock has a swing tag on it. It actually hasn't been worn. Wow, yeah.
Now, we can debate how good or bad that is, because obviously in the last 20 years, the market has been flooded with too much stock. And so, now, in a sense, this business is the beneficiary of that, but however, it's also the solution to trying to mitigate what we all know is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And I feel that resale, ignore it at your peril, it's a little bit like ignoring digital 10 years ago. Because firstly, you have a lot of EU legislation heading your way, so how your traceability and transparency and what your scope 3 is going to look like, and they're complicated things to work out.
Yeah.
So you may be heading into degrowth, and actually, so a solution to that is actually to really understand resale. So I'm a big advocate for that for all brands, but I particularly love working with Harvey and Warnett because they're just, we've been very focused on being luxury resale. We kind of talk about it that it just happens to be secondary in a sense, it just happens to be pre-owned, but we've met the customer at that luxury expectation, because I think, again, to make people want to change their behaviour, you have to imbue it to be joyful and desirable.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that kind of takes me up to where I am now.
A second right now. And you never sat on our green couch. There we go.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Should we start with some questions and we can pepper them with commenters when they come up?
Yeah, sounds good. Streetwear, obviously, so give me 5. So you were hustling wholesale, were you? Was that what you were doing, or were you doing?
Actually, I had 2 hats, and in the morning I was kind of laughably called the company secretary.
Yes.
So I was very much kind of like, doing all the invoicing and doing the kind of literally doing layman kind of accounting. And, I installed the first computer that we had there, took it off and so we'd have, the guys, we chose the strategy around kind of like where things would sell, and we were very stringent on that, and it was very much kind of focused into kind of the coolest store in every city. It was very true to kind of skateboarders, surfers, kind of low riders. And so in the morning, like they'd be coming in, we'd be kind of, selling our stock to them, and that was the kind of wholesale side of the business. Yeah. We also produced clothes. We had a factory in Camden that we worked with. So a lot of the Japanese stuff would come in as samples, and then we'd have a lot of that manufactured and then send that back to be sold in Tokyo, because they like the fact it said made in England.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Then I did the PR in the afternoon.
Did you?
And then very funny, because I used to send Edward Enfield, bagfuls of clothes in black bin liners across to sort of ID.
Yeah.
So weird that life came full circle with him a few years later.
Yeah. So weird, isn't it? I suppose, listening to you now, our question was going to be about the convergence of streetwear and luxury, but it's always been there, hasn't it? This streetwear and luxury kind of element.
I think. I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's interesting because I know we get very excited. For example, if Vogue put hysteric glamour into their pages, it still felt like the holy grail of kind of arriving with editorial. But actually, of course, it was really about the face and arena and ID and working with those guys. But I think I think luxury is better off for kind of having that kind of collaboration, because you work with an array of creatives and artists and a social movement that kind of involves. So you're blending heritage with progress, and I personally am all for that. But I think the reality check is people talk about it as the mixture and the tension between high-low culture, but actually they're so akin in value structure. I mean, any of those people I was lucky enough to work with, they had such deep knowledge, they were total specialists, they were often creating things that were really fit for purpose. And what I mean by that is like, what do I want to wear when I'm on a skateboard?
Skateboarders are snobby as well about the clothes that they will wear.
Yeah, well, they were kind of, so they were building things that didn't exist. They were filling a gap for themselves in the market. And I think luxury is very akin to that. Think of most of these luxury houses, they may have started as a bespoke luggage company that was filling a solution and have deep specialist knowledge. And so I think they're parallel tracks. So it's quite interesting when they converge.
I think it's coming across with like climbing gear and running gear now, isn't it? We were like climbing gear seems to be like the kind of gore-core. Is that, I've got it right? Gore-core, indeed. Nice. My husband is a climber, but now he's like, oh, now I'm trendy. Yes.
By default.
Yes, absolutely, you're trendy. Sorry. So, okay, but I think, do you feel like when streetwear brands do collaborations, like, this is old hat now, but like, if we're looking at like Supreme and Louis Vuitton, do you think it's authentic, or do you think it's a bit stretched? I suppose, I mean, it's the same business as recruitment.
I think like everything, you know, there was a kind of, it's at that beginning moment, there is a real newness and excitement to it. I think like most things in life, it's knowing when to kind of move on from something. So I only think it feels like that if maybe there's been one collection too many, or people start to feel that it's been over commercialized. And you know, you have to remember that Supreme is a brand that's been around for over 30 years. You know, James deserves, you know, all the success that he has kind of, you know, built into that business, as does sort of, you know, people like Sean Stussy, and you know, they have for, and also what I was always super impressed with was those people we work with. It was not about, you know, nobody was in it to build an empire. You know, nobody was in it to kind of like about the numbers and how everyone was in it because they believed in it and they kind of enjoyed it. And I think that's why it's had the longevity it's had. But like everything, I think there's a time and a place and a moment, and then, you know, fashion always moves on.
Absolutely.
Going into editorial in its heyday as associate publisher for Vogue, then moving e-com side for YNAB. You've mastered the craft of commercial content. I wondered if you could see a route out of the issues that the media industry faces.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been a very kind of, you know, changing, evolving landscape, but again, everything changes, doesn't it? You know, there's always kind of consequence to change. So I don't believe it's the death of the old. I think it's the change in status quo. And for me, I think, you know, choose your customer. Who's it for? What's it for? And then I think it's your responsibility to delight them and connect with them. And if you can do that, then they will be your best advocates. They will be your word of mouth, peers to peer. And then you create something that if it didn't exist, that people would miss. And I think if you really are very specific, it's a bit like what I was saying about the streetwear brands. You know, if you can really focus on that, then I think there is no reason why you will not exist. I think what becomes problematic is this is not about absolute scale. It's really about being very clear about, you know, what hook you hang yourself on. And making sure that, you know, that is something, as I said, that people would miss if you were not there. So for me, life is more about being specific, and especially within luxury, because, you know, luxury is finite. And so people can come and look, you know, then you have people, you know, if it's a service proposition, who might browse, then you have people who might, you know, shop and return, or you know, but then every project that way has its epicenter. And I think the focus needs to be on that. You look after those people, and then the kind of rest will follow. So there might just need to be an adjustment of understanding. But I even think big platforms, I even think media platforms like an Instagram or a TikTok or platforms like Amazon, the world is a mass of niches. So even with the scale, actually when you're using those platforms, you're using it in a very niche way. So you will be following the things that you like, the people that you like. So it's actually entirely irrelevant that there's maybe millions of people on there, because you're not communicating with millions of people. Even Depop is like that. You ask any teenager, they're probably only buying off a handful of people, because they've connected with that person and they know that they're a similar style, a similar size. So it's everything really, as I said, is a mass of niches. And I think you have to kind of come to some realization and reality around that, and actually just own it. And I think there's a lot of success that can be had in that.
That's interesting you saying that. We were talking to the global brand director of a big beauty conglomerate, and she was saying that they realised during the pandemic that they'd lost their North Star of each brand, because they were, all of their niches about all of their things, they tried to be like this kind of mass cool, hadn't they, across various different things, and tried to lean into like whatever Kylie Jenner was doing, whatever blah 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 was doing. And then they realised that all of the stuff that was like the reason for their being had been
well then, as I said, it's you choose the customer, like who are you for and what are you for. So if that then just becomes pervasive, then I don't need to necessarily come to you for that. And I think I don't know, for me, I think it's really important. And I think therefore if you can do that, there are moments where you can go big, especially kind of with sort of, there are digital drop the mic moments that you can do, but those are like PR halos that just catch everyone's attention. But the reality is whatever you're doing, there's always going to be a finite group of people who are really into it. Yeah. And you can't lose sight of them.
Yeah, completely. Do you feel now that you are trained officially as a coach and you've started doing that alongside your normal kind of day-to-day life, do you feel like you have been able to kind of take a step back and really understand what makes people great at their jobs? Do you feel like there's specific skills that you feel when you're working with people, both on a kind of day-to-day and when you're coaching them, where you feel like there's specific things that are going to be like, great, you've got these skills, and you can either kind of make them, learn those skills, or they already have them already?
Well, definitely with the kind of coaching I do, I would call it like eclectic coaching. So it's very much about the individual and what they need. I mean, often people on a human level have the same types of concerns and worries and difficulties, but of course people can have a huge different array of skill sets and can be, some people can already be really great listeners and really great at asking questions, and some people can have some sort of self-awareness or almost be too self-aware. So you're kind of working out kind of, where that support structure kind of needs to be. But I don't know, I mean, I think kind of in the world of work, I have it wouldn't be a view that I'd sort of impress upon people, but I certainly have my own kind of moral compass about what I think good leadership is. And I think, all too often leadership for me is it's a bit of a cliche to say it's a team sport, but I think I worry about businesses where that leader has become everything that everybody is concerned about or preoccupied with, because in that sense innovation might be leaving your business because everyone's just worried about what this one person is saying or how they're sort of like being. And I think it's your responsibility to be an inspirational representative of the group and to kind of align with the values and vision of the group. So, and I touched upon before about, I think it's about inverse mentoring. I think it's about really being self-aware and understanding your own impact in a room. And I think that's really important to kind of know when you're sort of maybe C-suite level of kind of actually what it is that happens then when you kind of like come into the room. So, but I think alignment of words and actions are very important. I think there's a lot of theatre that happens at work, but I think ultimately people don't really remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. And I think it's really important to be consistent. I think good leadership is like when I come into work, I want to know, I don't want to have to be challenged around what behaviour I'm going to be dealing with that day from someone. So, you can be dancing with whatever turns up and evolving as your company moves, but I think it's very helpful if people working with you can feel the consistency of you and your behaviour, and and I think the more trust you give people, the more trustworthy they become.
Yeah. 100%.
So,
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Nice. What kind of skill sets do you feel that are most valuable in a modern brand leadership role within an organisation?
Oh God, I probably just said them.
Just done my question.
Yeah, I think
my highlighted question, Jo. You've done it already. You're in your strategic role.
I am.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah.
In your strategic role at HEWI, which has hardly ever worn it for those people that weren't tuned in, what have you learned about e-commerce that surprised you?
Oh, well, I think it was what I was saying before, that actually, really, I mean, again, it depends what space you're in. We're very particular, we're very in a luxury space. But, ultimately you are servicing the same woman who has been shopping at other luxury, retail outlets. So I think everything does then back into a little bit about knowledge and customer care. I think that tipping point to purchase is often about advice. I think often, people just want to sort of feel that they're making the right choices. So it's, as I said, it's sort of secondary that the product might be secondary. And I was blown away by just the quality, the quantity, and what's been quite exciting to witness is that I think originally the customer who might have been part of the supply chain of detoxing a wardrobe and then going out into the primary market. And this is what I think is super interesting for the primary market to know, is that woman is now consistently staying in the kind of HEWI circle. So she now is sort of, dropping off stuff, but actually understands that she can find great stuff there too, and we can source things for her. And so it's already sort of losing my voice.
Yeah, that system where you're able to, like, I'm like that. Like, I've got like credit in resale platforms, and I'll sell loads of stuff, and then I'll buy loads of stuff and sell loads of stuff. You're the same, aren't we? We're vintage girls, aren't we?
Yeah, we
as
are.
well as, but I do shop at Hardly Ever Worn It, but also where I live in Walthamstow, there's a wonderful woman called Gigi, and she has Gigi's dressing room. She's just a load of stuff at Trinity actually, but she has this huge wardrobe of thousands of pieces. And she started off as this kind of slightly like disconnected shop, and now she's become this absolute powerhouse of just renting out stuff or people dropping off clothes and then getting credit, and then they all just kind of live in her world. So
I'm so sorry. I haven't been very well.
No.
Oh no.
So for you to end up having lots of, why don't you have a strepsil? And Jo and I can talk about some bits and pieces while you're doing that. So the other questions we were going to ask, I feel like you probably
Let's try and squeeze one more.
I think
I just started to lose my voice.
I think the only question that I think would be brilliant for people to know is the most influential person in your career so far.
Oh gosh. Okay, well, hopefully anyone can hear me. I'm so sorry.
Shout the name out.
Quick, just shout out.
Laryngitis is the worst timing. So, okay, I think for me, if I can kind of get my voice to hold down. Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry, this happens, it's fine. We're not
so well.
We're not on the BBC. It's LinkedIn Live, and it's just us. So
this morning I could hardly speak at all.
Oh
so
God, Rachel,
it's just been terrible.
What a saint coming in. Thank you. We really appreciate you.
I think for me that would be a bit of a jigsaw of people actually, and I think what I've experienced is sort of taking from people the things that I've connected with value-wise. So at Condé Nast, I worked with some people who really believed in like honesty and trust and longevity in business and building, relationships that you could really, build upon, but also that you would, were professional and delivered upon. So I think that's a very good bedrock for kind of who you should be in business. But then I also learned kind of at Net-a-Porter that, the power of the word, and I think words matter. And I think, being able to be employed, to feel that you're employed for your opinion, and that's very motivating to be seen. And I think, again, to be able to feel that somebody's protecting the creativity and the process and the way to think at work creates really high performance teams. So I've sort of smorgasborded those things that I've seen and really kind of felt, that's really kind of quite important. And then also I've learned a lot along the way of like what not to do, because actually I think that's as important.
We've worked in some quite
intense
environment. You've talked about them all in a very positive light, but we know there's a lot of tea that hasn't been spilled.
So I really felt, I'm very passionate about psychological safety in the workplace.
Yes.
And that was what was very motivating for me to sort of do the coaching work. But I think you have a duty of care to people who work with you. And I think you have to be very cognitive of how you turn up. And who you are. I mean, what an amazing legacy if people can say they're better off because they worked with you. And I think, are you a person who takes a withdrawal from people, or do you make a deposit? And so I think these are things to be really aware of and to be conscious of, and to try and, simply put, do the right thing.
Yeah.
So, so for me, I saw a lot of people not doing the right thing. I saw a lot of people, operating either themselves from a place of fear or imbuing that into the atmosphere. And I think we're like neural Wi-Fi. And so we pick up on the mood and we will emulate it. So, the better we are, the better we become. or the lower we go, the worse it becomes. And I think you know that. You can walk into a room and you can sense someone is holding the energy in that room, or you can feel if people are uncomfortable, or you can feel so. I think all those things are things that I've always been incredibly curious about people, and I used to find it a fascination sitting in it, I still do, in an executive room, and just wondering what's going on for everybody. And I think if you take a bit of time to do that, then you can create a lot more collaboration and just try and operate from a place of bringing people forward with you, taking friction out of the way. Don't be afraid of creating other leaders. And so anybody I've been lucky enough who I've shown me glimpses of that is something that I felt very passionately, if I was able to, would like to try and do some of that myself.
Paying it forward. And I'm calling it because I don't
God,
want you
I'm
to...
so
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it back and be mortified at my sort of like sudden march.
Your sudden death.
Voice.
Your sudden death.
So apologies for the cough if anyone's still there.
We really appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much, because I think this is just so fascinating, and just the way you describe things is just such a lovely. Your
Thank you.
language around talking about people and the way you work, like, it's just really engaging and it's really beautiful, and you obviously really care about who you work with, which is just so nice, and there's no wonder that Becky was raving about you.
I guess my sort of in a nutshell expression on it will probably be choose your reputation because you can.
Yes. You're full of like taglines, including ad agency. You can tell. Choose your reputation as you can.
In the interview, I loved that.
We'll call it on that.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a second to say thank you to the team here. So thanks, guys. And Busy the dog, who you can't see, but she's fast asleep. We were very worried that she was going to be leaping on everybody, which she was doing until 30 seconds before we went live, but she has been asleep. Thank you so much for joining us, and if you enjoyed this content that we're making, then we are also on TikTok. We have a YouTube channel where these all live as well, and then we have our podcast, The Atelier, which you are welcome to listen to on Spotify or Apple. We've got lots of really interesting interviews on there. My favourite one that I keep talking to people about at the moment is with Allegra, who is one of our office colleagues. She's a brilliant founder of a business called The Booking Project, who are an influencer marketing agency. But she's also a brilliant trans woman and trans activist who is just absolutely great. And she's also my twin, because we live very close to each other and we have the same birthday.
Birthday twins. Come and join us next time. We'll be talking to the formal global buying director for Net-a-Porter and Chief Commercial Officer for Matches, Elizabeth von der Goltz. Do you know her?
You probably know.
Everybody knows each other.
You're all connected by a
in the meantime, if you want to get in touch, then please find us on LinkedIn or email us at hello@talentatelier.com.
I'll see you next time.